So Bernie Sanders pledges allegiance to the Democratic Party, leaving those who support him and those who don't up in arms, but for different reasons. Let's go over first what happened here. So here's an NPR article saying Bernie Sanders signs Democratic Party loyalty pledge for 2020 run. Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders has signed a loyalty pledge promising to run and govern as a Democrat if he wins the presidency in 2020, a new requirement for candidates that largely grew out of his own 2016 campaign. The pledge Sanders signed was given to all active Democratic presidential campaigns last week. It affirms to the DNC chairman that they are, quote, a Democrat, are a member of the Democratic Party, will accept the Democratic nomination, and will run and serve as a member of the Democratic Party, unquote. So this has left people up in arms. First of all, the reason why the DNC felt like they needed to do this is clear. It's because Bernie Sanders has been an independent forever, pretty much. And what they want is they say, okay, listen, if you're going to run on the Democratic ticket, then fine. But when you win, you need to then say you're going to be a Democratic president. You can't then turn around and say, I'm going to be an independent. I'm still an independent. I'm not really a Democrat. That's what they were really afraid of. So this was just kind of like, I mean, it's a bit strange to me that they feel like they need to say this. It's like, you must marry me and you must make sure you never cheat. And if you do, how dare you? I mean, I don't know what exactly the recourse would be. Let's say if Sanders were to win the presidency and then he says, I'm still an independent. I don't exactly know what the recourse would be. But what they want to do is they just want to make sure he doesn't do that. They want to make sure that if he's going to run as a Democrat, he's going to be a Democratic president. He's not going to be an independent president. Okay. So this has people up in arms because some are thinking that this means more than it does. Some are thinking that this means Bernie Sanders has to then go along with the party line no matter what the party line is, that he has to regurgitate whatever it is that they decide is their platform, that he has to listen to the establishment, that he's basically just going to become a Democratic, a DNC shell. That is not what this means. All it means is they're just wanting to make sure if he wins, when he's sitting there in the White House, he doesn't then say, I'm actually an independent, I'm not a Democrat. They want to make sure he says, I am a Democratic president. They want that win. They want to list him as a Democratic president. That's what they want. So this doesn't mean that they're going to control him by any means. Now, the people who are opposing Bernie Sanders, they're saying the same thing they've always said, which is he's not a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. And that's what I want to really talk about today is why is Bernie Sanders not a Democrat? And I think that's the real question people should be asking rather than screaming, he's not even a Democrat, which I hear every single day. Every single day. At least one person says, he's not even a Democrat. Why would I vote for him? So let's first, I think the real question is, why isn't he a Democrat? And maybe people should be asking that question. That seems to be a really important question to find out, why is this man who has been, we're going to go over what he has done in his life. Why is this man not a Democrat? So let us go over some of his accomplishments or things that he has championed or fought for his entire career. This is something I got from occasionalplanet.org. Huge list. I put the link down below. But just some of the highlights here. Bernie Sanders led the first ever civil rights sit-in in Chicago history to protest segregated housing. In 1963, Bernie Sanders participated in MLK's Civil Rights March, one of only two sitting U.S. senators to have heard MLK's Civil Rights March, MLK's I Have a Dream speech in person in the March on Washington, D.C. Both the NAACP and NHLA, which is the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, have given Sanders 100% voting scores during his tenure in the Senate. He earns a D- from the NRA. I know a lot of people scream about his NRA rating. They want him to have an F, but I mean, he's got a D-, guys. 1984, Mayor Sanders established the Burlington Community Land Trust, the first municipal housing land trust in the country for affordable housing. In 1991, he was one of a handful in Congress to vote against authorizing U.S. military force in Iraq, saying, I have a real fear that the region is not going to be more peaceful or more stable after the war. He said at the time, in 1992, Congress passed Sanders' first signed piece of legislation to create the National Program of Cancer Registries. A Reader's Digest article calls the law the cancer weapon America needs most. July of 1996, Sanders is one of only 67 out of 435 votes against the Discriminatory Defense of Marriage Act, which defined federal benefits to same-sex couples legally married. In July of 1999, Sanders becomes the first member of Congress to personally take seniors across the border to Canada to buy lower-cost prescription drugs. He took them himself. August 1999, an overflow crowd of Vermonters packs a St. Michael's College Town Hall meeting hosted by Sanders to protest an IBM plan to cut older workers' pensions. After IBM enacts the plan, Sanders works to reverse the cuts, passing a pair of amendments to prohibit the federal government from acting to overturn a federal district court decision that ruled that IBM's plan violated pension age discrimination laws. And thanks to Sanders' efforts, IBM agreed to a $320 million legal settlement with some 130,000 IBM workers and retirees. November of 1999, Sanders votes no on a bill to undo decades of financial regulations enacted after the Great Depression. This legislation, he predicts at the time, quote, will lead to fewer banks and financial service providers, increased charges and fees for individual consumers and small businesses, diminished credit for rural America, and taxpayer exposure to potential losses should a financial conglomerate fail. It would lead to more mega mergers, a small number of corporations dominating the financial service industry, and further concentration of power in our country, unquote. That was all just up into the 90s. Now we're getting into the 2000s here. October of 2001, Sanders votes against the Usa Patriot Act. Quote, all of us want to protect the American people from terrorist attacks, but in a way that does not undermine basic freedoms, unquote. By the way, Joe Biden wrote the Patriot Act. It wasn't called the Patriot Act when he wrote it, but he was... It was pretty much, he wrote it. October of 2002, Sanders votes against the Bush-Cheney war in Iraq. December of 2007, Sanders authored Energy Efficient and Conservation Grant Program passed into law. September of 2008, thanks to Sanders' efforts, funding for the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, funding doubles, helping millions of low-income Americans heat their homes in the winter. February of 2009, Sanders works with Republican Senator Chuck Grassley to pass an amendment to an economic recovery bill preventing Wall Street banks that the taxpayer bailouts from replacing laid-off U.S. workers with exploited and poorly paid foreign workers. March of 2010, President Barack Obama signs into law the Affordable Care Act with a major Sanders provision to expand federally qualified community health centers. Sanders secures $12.5 billion in funding for the program, which now serves more than 25 million Americans. In July of 2010, Sanders works with Republican Congressman Ron Paul in the House to pass a measure as part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Bill to audit the Federal Reserve, revealing how the independent agency gave $16 trillion in a near zero interest loans to banks and businesses after the 2008 economic collapse. March of 2013, he leads a successful effort to stop a, quote, chained CPI, which proposal supported by congressional Republicans and the administration to cut Social Security and disabled veterans benefits. April of 2013, Sanders introduces legislation to break up major Wall Street banks. January of 2015, Sanders votes against the Keystone XL pipeline. March of 2015, Bernie Sanders introduced legislation to expand benefits and strengthen the retirement program for generations to come. I mean, that was all just up until his previous election, which is when this article was written. This guy, all of the things he's done. So he's fought for marriage equality. He's fought for desegregation. He was at the March on Washington when MLK gave the I Have a Dream speech. He has fought for people to not lose their pensions, to break up big banks. He has fought against war. He has done all of these things. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is this man not a Democrat? Ask yourself that question. Why? Why would somebody who is clearly representing Democratic values, who is the most Democratic senator of all the senators, who is one of the most Democratic people in all of Congress, what is it about the Democratic Party is what you should be asking yourself that makes this man, who has fought since the 60s for equality for all people and for economic equality, racial equality, and gender equality, you have to ask yourself why this guy won't claim that he is a Democrat. That's the question you should be asking. Not, oh, he's not a Democrat. Oh, I'm not going to vote for. Why would I vote for somebody who's not even a Democrat? No, maybe you should ask yourself why somebody who completely embodies everything you've wanted, everything you stand for, why he will not say he's a Democrat. That's the question.